Now, this morning, we're going to kick off by diving into the theme of risk, innovation and security. And our next speaker has been at the forefront of this technological transformation. A geopolitical expert turned AI strategist whose work reveals how intelligence itself is being scaled and deployed in ways that redefine the global ecosystem. From the corridors of diplomacy to the front lines of cybersecurity, she's someone who has experienced firsthand how the AI revolution is going beyond innovation. It's about control. So let's give a very warm welcome to our first speaker to the stage, author, entrepreneur, trailblazing AI expert, Nina Schick.
Thank you, Naga, and good morning, everyone. It's an absolute pleasure to be here. RiskX, the theme of this conference, resonates so profoundly with me because I think the greatest risk of our age isn't inflation, it's not market volatility, it's not even war in the conventional sense. I think the greatest risk we face is that democracies fail to reimagine their sovereignty and economic prosperity in the age of AI. We stand here today, right, in Rome, the cradle of Western civilization along with ancient Greece. So many of our ideals were first founded here, democracy, rule of law, citizenship. And Rome teaches us all a timeless lesson that even the greatest civilizations can fall, and that ideas only endure when they're backed by power. And in every era, power is linked to technology. In the 21st century, that is going to be artificial intelligence. The one who becomes the leader in AI will be the ruler of the world. I didn't say it. Vladimir Putin did. Almost 10 years ago, in 2017. Now, that might have seemed hyperbolic, over the top, or it certainly wasn't something that many people were listening to in 2017. I was. But today, this is already the reality. AI is reshaping the global balance of power. This isn't something that's abstract for me, because I spent the first half of my career in geopolitics working with these global leaders. And the predominant theme throughout my work was crisis, right? It was the declining trust in institutions. It was war, energy crisis, crisis around sovereignty, around migration. And behind each of these crises, I saw a bigger theme. And that theme was the exponential power of technology and how quickly it was reshaping our world. So I don't think that power in this era is going to be defined by diplomacy or treaties. It's going to be defined by the most transformative technology of all, artificial intelligence. If Rome's power rested on legions and roads, then in the 21st century, it's about chips and computational power. But how did we get here? Well, for decades, for the past 30, 40 years, the exponential progress in technological change has been defined by a very salient observation made by Gordon Moore, co-founder of Intel, in 1965, when he predicted that the number of transistors on a chip would double every 18 to 24 months. Now, Moore's law, of course, has been the exponential technological force that has made our entire society, our entire civilization, our economic prosperity, military security, everything has become dependent on computing and chips, right? That exponential has proven to be so powerful that a chip had 64 transistors on it in the 1960s, right? This was an average chip. And today, the most advanced chips that you're looking at have in excess of 200 billion transistors on it. So you've seen that computing power increase to a magnitude of over 3.25 billion, right? This law made computers faster, smaller, cheaper, and it made computers become the foundation of modern life, right? They power finance, medicine, logistics, communication, even war. And that happened in a relatively short period of time, this power of hardware. Today, I think we're looking at something even more potent, and even more potent forces at play, AI scaling laws. The principle is simple, but it's staggeringly important. When you look at building AI systems, this is actually where all of these advances have come in the past decade, in particular in deep learning. We're seeing that the more data, parameters, and computational power you feed into these systems, the more intelligent or capable they become. This is why we've seen in a relatively short period of time, right, just over 10 years, foundational AI models like AlexNet, trained on 60 million parameters. AlexNet could identify an image of a cat, right? To where we stand in 2024, last year, where you had GPT-4, trained in excess of 1.7 trillion parameters, which could basically do a lot more than identify images of cats. It can write contracts, it can write code, it can synthesize the entire corpus of human knowledge, everything that's available online. And this is happening at a pace that dwarfs previous technological progress, right? AI scaling is doubling roughly every 6 months, 3 times faster than Moore's law. There's a real interesting experiment playing out right now. Who's heard of Elon Musk's Colossus supercomputer cluster? Okay. So Elon Musk, obviously one of the richest men in the world, determined to have the smartest AI in the world, determined to build it, is doing a very fascinating experiment in AI scaling right now, where he's putting together, and it's an unbelievable feat of engineering, the world's biggest cluster of GPUs, right, to brute force, to scale intelligence in this way. When he started last year, he wired together, he and his team, 200,000 GPUs, which was seen as an extraordinary feat. But I think by this year, he's going to be the very first. This is going to be the first in the world where he's going to have 1 million GPUs wired together. Now, that's at a cost of some $40 to $60 billion. So again, to give you a sense of just how much capital is flowing into this space to scale AI's capabilities. Remember, this is just one experiment. But it isn't only about scaling the capabilities of these systems, right? How intelligent can they become? There's another critical factor here. It's not just about performance, it's also about cost. Now, a few years ago, the cost of 1 million tokens, so basically, if you try to get AI to write 1 million words, that costs you $60. Not scalable, very expensive. That's in free fall. In just 3 years, that price has dropped to 0.06 cents, 99.9% cheaper. So the cost of inference, the actual cost of applying AI to this transformational scale, is plunging. So what happens, right, when something this powerful, and remember, the experiment in how intelligent these systems can actually be is ongoing. At the same time, inference is in free fall, the costs. So what happens when something this powerful becomes this cheap? It ceases to become a tool. It becomes a utility. And that is the core of my thesis, which I call industrializing intelligence. Now, this is a really profound departure in historical terms, because for all of human history, 200,000 years, intelligence, and then knowledge that came from that intelligence, has been scarce, non-scalable, and locked into individual human lives. So when AI makes intelligence a utility that's abundant, cheap, and infinitely scalable, what happens? Well, the answer is that it transforms society from the ground up, starting with the two domains that underpin and always have underpinned every civilization's sovereignty. It's economic prosperity and its security. Throughout history, right, the trend is clear. Again, we see that lesson in Rome. Societies with the most powerful technologies that are applied for economic prosperity and military prowess become the most powerful. So to frame AI as a story of automation or efficiency, it's just missing the point entirely. Yes, those are also important parts of AI's story, but this is the most important. The nation that achieves AI supremacy will not just lead, it's going to dominate the global balance of power. Only two nations seem to have grasped this so far, this reality. That is the United States and China. Now, China declared its ambitions very, very early, actually in 2017, the same year that Putin made that declaration. And both of these actually were influenced by the fact that in 2016 you saw some of the most seminal breakthroughs beginning in deep learning. And I'm specifically talking about Go, for the nerds in the room who are watching what Google DeepMind was building. But I digress. In 2017, China announced the next generation AI development plan. So it became doctrine, right? Strategy, almost has been for 10 years, that China will become the world's AI superpower by 2030. And 2 years later, in 2019, it announced another strategic doctrine that it would intelligentize the People's Liberation Army, the PLA, by embedding AI across command, logistics, drone, and weapons systems. Now, the US, while kind of leading in private innovation over the past few years, had no strategic doctrine for AI as a tool of sovereignty. In fact, President Biden, whom I've worked with in the past, under his tenure, AI was seen much more as a risk. Right? A lot of the debate over the past few years was about AI's existential risk. That changed very dramatically when Donald Trump came into office. The day after he took power, he signed the executive order on American leadership in AI, removing barriers to American leadership in AI. Now, you might still be thinking, well, this all sounds a little bit far-fetched. But for those of us who are interested in geopolitics, last week was very interesting because that ambition was on full display, right? When Xi Jinping presided over a vast parade just last week in Tiananmen Square, where he was flanked by both Vladimir Putin and Kim Jong-un. It's actually the first time these leaders have been seen together publicly. 10,000 troops marched in formation along, critically, AI-enabled drones, stealth fighters, and precision missile systems which would be guided by algorithms. So it's no wonder that the US has announced 2 months ago its AI action plan, right? It is formalizing this into a strategic doctrine as well. In July 2025, the AI action plan, where the president says it is a national security imperative, right? A national security imperative, I would say the most important for this current administration, for the United States to achieve and maintain unquestioned and unchallenged global technological dominance. So the US AI action plan pursues aggressive deregulation, rapid infrastructure build-out, including energy build-out, and promoting the full stack of American AI technology globally as a measure of its influence. So Washington, like Beijing is starting to see AI as the fundamental bedrock, right, of not only security, but economic prosperity too. And you're starting to see in the US, just as in China, the resurgence of a kind of public-private partnership in pursuit of this doctrine. And before you think, oh, that's kind of, it goes against, the market, state intervention, that's kind of not what happens in the US. It actually is historically what's happened throughout the 20th century. It harks back to moments like the Manhattan Project, where the US collaborated with the brightest, the US government collaborated with the brightest engineers, the best scientists, in that race to win the atomic bomb before the Nazis did. And in fact, some of the very technologies that are the seedlings of artificial intelligence and the seedlings of the modern digital economy, the entire semiconductor industry, the internet, they all come from R&D from the US state. Now, achieving the status of an AI superpower, what does that actually look like? It's a lot more than just some clever engineers writing code or building software in Silicon Valley, right? It requires control over the entire technology stack, which supports the production of intelligence at scale. This is how I like to think about it, so this pyramid. At the base, you have the foundation, right? This is the industrial and raw resources that are required. There are 3 critical steps. So this is secure and abundant energy, critical raw materials, advanced manufacturing, and robust physical infrastructure. The next part of the pyramid is the engine. This is where the computational power comes in. This is the hardware, advanced chip design, semiconductor manufacturing, having cloud infrastructure to be able to take all this raw resource and energy that you have at the foundation and then convert it through the engine to actual intelligence. Right? This is where you have the apps. This is where you have the ecosystem of models, cutting edge. You have data access in governments. This is the AI software and platforms. And only when you have control over these 3 layers of the pyramid do you reach the apex, which is where you start to see this transformative AI integration across society and the economy, right, from an economic prosperity perspective or innovation perspective, but actually also from a strategic autonomy perspective. So you cannot lead this pyramid, you cannot become an AI superpower just by leading from the top. Domination requires vertical control over the full stack, supported at every level with the overarching enablers. Talent, elite talent, huge amounts of capital, and agile governance and regulation, right? And public trust. So it's easy to see which parts of this system the US leads in and where China has its own strategic advantages. However, what is becoming clear right now, and this is so tied into so much of what's happening right now with trade wars and new doctrines that are being formed, you cannot lead from the top alone. China has become the world's industrial powerhouse, right? It has the best competence on that foundational pillar of the pyramid. It's the most advanced hub of skilled manufacturing. The idea that you would manufacture in China because it's cheap is really a very outdated view. And this is something that people like Tim Cook, Apple CEO, were saying all the way back in 2018. We don't manufacture in China because it's cheap. We manufacture there because of the talent, the elite ecosystem. So already today, it has over 3.5 million factories, compared to maybe 250,000 in the US. So it doesn't just assemble, right? It's determined to lead and to own. And the fascinating thing is that in critical industries of the future, you're already starting to see how the past 30 years of China being this kind of industrial base for the world means that it's catching up or leapfrogging its Western counterparts in critical industries. So some people call this China Shock 2.0. What happens when actually China becomes the place where the most sophisticated technologies are built and developed? To give you an example, the world's leading EV manufacturer isn't a Western company, right? It's not Tesla. It's BYD, Chinese company that has over 22.2% of global market share already. The world's leading company for battery production is another Chinese company, CATL, with almost 40% of global market share. And on things like drones, I mean, the advantage is undeniable. DJI has about 90% of the world's commercial drone market. And of course, even though this is the commercial market, this has very clear military applications too. It's like what the Secretary of State, Marco Rubio, has said. If we stay on the road we're on right now, in less than 10 years, virtually everything that matters to us in life will depend on whether or not China will allow us to have it. So the United States and its Western allies cannot afford to be in a position where access to critical technology depends on the permission of one strategic rival. And yet, that is exactly where we find ourselves in. We're finding that the entire industrial base of the 21st century is heavily skewed towards one country. I can think of a time in history when this happened before. In the 1930s and 1940s and 1950s, the biggest industrial powerhouse in the world was the United States. Right? That's why it was able to win the Second World War and why it became the world's hegemon after the wake of the Second World War. So this idea of offshoring in the sake of efficiency for globalization has actually led us to a very critical vulnerability at just this juncture where technology matters more than before. And this is why the pendulum is swinging back. Right? When you see the talk of trade wars, or you see the talk about an onshoring critical supply chains, this is what it's about. The US and its allies are rediscovering something that they once forgot: the importance of the industrial base. It's not lost to me that we're standing here again in Rome and Italy, and in Germany. I'm half German. I used to live in the UK. Once all great industrial nations, now floundering because they don't have that industrial base so much as they used to. So you're starting to see how under the tenure of Trump, all these American companies are being put under pressure, right? Huge political pressure to start repatriating their supply chains and build in America again. This is why you've seen, well, not TSMC, that's not an American company, that's obviously a Taiwanese company, $100 billion investment, Apple, $500 billion investment, NVIDIA, $500 billion to build factories and fabs in the United States in the pursuit of that industrial intelligence. There was even a hot mic moment, I think it was yesterday or the day before, where Trump was with Mark Zuckerberg, and he asked Zuckerberg to say how much he was committing to America. He very awkwardly was like, oh, the $650 billion. The point is, the era of unchecked globalization is over. The defining contest of our time is not just about building the best applications, right? Or the best software. It's about infrastructure, and it's about who can secure and scale the entire industrial foundation for intelligence, from the mine to the model. That's what it means to build an AI superpower. Now, there are a few decisive choke points that are going to make a real difference, where the asymmetric advantage can really add up. The first is energy. Who's heard of Stargate? A few hands, yes. So Stargate is the $500 billion project that's being built in Abilene, West Texas, close to where I live now, by OpenAI, Oracle, and you can see here the scale of what an AI factory really looks like. Right? This is far beyond any infrastructure we've known in the past. Now, once Stargate is being built, so it has up to 5 gigawatts of operational power. That's more than a few nuclear reactors. 5 gigawatts of power is more than 50 times a normal data center today. That's more than entire countries like Singapore require. So the first critical unlocker to building intelligence at an industrial scale is energy, and you need cheap and abundant energy. And when it comes to that, well, China has a clear lead. You can already see between 23 to 24, it added more than 250 gigawatts of solar to the grid, China did. That's more than the US has done throughout entire history. Even though the US still has the most baseload for nuclear reactors currently, China is adding 33 nuclear reactors to the grid. And you can see how in 2025, the operational energy that China has is 3 times more than the US. And as for Europe, well, we lag really far behind, right? That's critical. The second, I think, critical point is semiconductors and chips. Let's not forget the fact that the world still runs on one island. Over 60% of global semiconductors are manufactured in Taiwan by one company, TSMC, doing over 92% of the world's most advanced chips. No wonder the Pentagon takes war games of where China potentially invades Taiwan extremely seriously, because these chips are the foundation of everything in modern life, and that's why you're trying to see this critical effort to onshore chip production into the United States. Again, you're starting to see how these fabs are now operational in Arizona, and even though it's more expensive to manufacture these chips in the US, the CEOs of AMD and NVIDIA, they say it's worth it, because they want to make sure that that global supply chain is diversified. Another critical point is rare earth dependencies, right? China controls over 70% of rare earth mining and over 90% of its processing. Now, these are absolutely critical inputs for electric vehicles, for turbines, for missiles, for semiconductors. No wonder you're starting to see, again, a more interventionist state. The US Pentagon has recently taken a stake in MP Materials. It's the only mining company in the United States, and you're starting to see across the world how countries like Japan and Australia are trying to secure their supply chains, so to overturn that dependency. But for now, it's quite clear, Beijing holds the card. The ultimate choke point, however, perhaps, is talent, right? You need the people to be able to do this. The engineers, the 10x amazing algorithm writers. And this is why the global talent wars are just so fierce. You're seeing engineers being offered multi-billion dollar pay packages, right? That's the competition between the frontier labs right now. And a lot of that talent is of Chinese origin. Zheng Jiahao, he's recently become the chief AI scientist at Meta Superintelligence. He was seminal in the foundation of ChatGPT. You know, he's just skipped to Meta, but it's like Jensen Huang, founder of NVIDIA, says, half of the world's AI talent is Chinese. Even a single person can have a major impact in the context of such huge historical changes. So perhaps the deeper question then, as we come to the end, is not who has the talent, of course, that is very important, but it is what mission does that talent serve? Because we must ask very seriously, what do we want to do with AI, and how should it be a utility that serves our economic prosperity and national security? For China, the mission is clear. They call it the great rejuvenation of the Chinese nation, right? Overturning the century of humiliation, which started with the Opium Wars, when weaker technology left it vulnerable to foreign powers. Technology is its chosen instrument to reclaim power and leadership. And for the West, the mission is less defined. Of course, we want breakthroughs in medicine, in science, and in creativity. But too much of our brightest talent has been channeled over the past few decades into trivial consumer apps, food delivery apps, or the version that Mark Zuckerberg has for AI, where everyone has 5 AI friends. Is 5 AI friends really the best exemplification of that future for us? I think instead AI should shape the very foundation of prosperity, security, and freedom. So the greatest risk is that we fail to reimagine democracy in the age of artificial intelligence, and the greatest opportunity is that we succeed, using this moment to renew our societies for another century. I think the US AI Action Plan put it best when it spoke of the magnitude of the choice ahead of us: an industrial revolution, an information revolution, and a renaissance, all at once. This is the potential that AI presents. The opportunity before us is both inspiring and humbling. And in the end, it isn't about machines, right? It's about people. And whether we seize this opportunity or lose it, it is up to us. Thank you very much.